The Ministry of Defense claims that a Tochka-U missile complex is used only by Ukrainian army. Huh. Do you guys want to know why this is interesting? I think it might be time to talk about why this is interesting. I think it's time to talk about what happened. So, let's turn off the music because this is very serious. Okay, so let's talk about what happened. So, what happened is that there was a missile strike in Ukraine. And this missile strike hit a train station. Specifically, it hit a train station that people were using to try to evacuate the country and get to safety to, flee the war. And it ended up killing dozens upon dozens of people. And all the evidence points to Russia launching a missile and hitting this train station. And continuing their war against civilians that they've launched at the start of the conflict, whether it be their brutal bombing of Kharkiv when they've struck schools and hospitals, maternity wards, and killed, they've killed around 150 children so far during the conflict, or over the 5,000 plus people who have been killed by the Russian bombardment in Mariupol. And the thing is about Mariupol is we'll never really know until probably after the conflict is over how many people have really died in Mariupol. These are just estimates by the mayor at the moment, or their terrible slaughtering of the civilian population in Bucha, in the Kiev Oblast, where civilians were shot with their hands tied behind their backs and their bodies burned to try to dispose of the evidence. This is another extension of their war against civilians. They have targeted civilian infrastructure before in Mariupol, in Kiev, in Kharkiv, in Cherniv, in Sumy, in Odessa. They've done this all across Ukraine. This is nothing new. This is a continuance of their policy that they've been doing since February 24th when the invasion. I don't want to say the war because the war in the Donbass has been going on since 2014, but since the invasion of Ukraine started. This is also not really a huge change of Kremlin policy historically. All you need to do is look at the hospitals that were struck by Russian jets in Syria. Actually, not only hospital. I think there was one instance, and I always like to highlight this when I can. There was an instance in Syria where there was a hospital full of civilians struck by Russian missiles, and then the Russian government used that footage to brag about the effectiveness of their military systems, of their missile systems, to the Armenian government. They did it on Twitter, posted that footage that they took publicly for everyone to see them striking the hospital, completely unashamed of it. Or just look at what the Russians did in Grozny. Just look, Grozny, Russia war, look at some of those photographs, look at the footage, look at the destruction they wrought. Not a historic change when it comes to Russian military policy. But this instance is just another instance in this long line of Russian policy of targeting civilians, of killing civilians, or if not targeting civilians, which I believe the Russian military has engaged in, then at least being careless when it comes to protecting civilians with military strikes, with how precise they are when targeting legitimate military targets, and or, which is happening a lot more, hitting hospitals, hitting schools, killing children, killing civilians. We saw deliberate targeting of civilians in the Kiev Oblast. But let's talk about this specific instance. Russian missiles killed, and we're going to talk about the Russian response to this as well. Russian missiles killed dozens of people at a railway station on Friday in one of the deadliest attacks in the 6-week war, hitting a hub in eastern Ukraine where residents were gathering to flee a renewed Moscow offensive. There is a renewed offensive in the east of the country after the Russians have pulled out from the north, after they failed to take Kiev and they lost the Battle of Kiev. They have pulled out of the country and they're trying to redeploy in the east so they can salvage some sort of victory out of their failed invasion. 50 people were killed, including 5 children at the station, and about 100 were injured. So that's 50 dead, including 5 kids, not a threat to anyone, and 100 people, many of whom, 100 people injured, many of whom will probably be permanently disabled for the rest of their life, according to the Donetsk administration. Thousands of people were at the station during the missile strike, as residents of the Donetsk province are being evacuated to safer regions of Ukraine. What's interesting about this missile strike is yesterday's stream we talked about how the Ukrainian government has called for an evacuation of eastern Ukraine. Now, the reason they've called for an evacuation of areas like Donetsk and Luhansk, the parts of it that are still controlled by the Ukrainian military, is because they were, fearful of civilians dying in military engagements. They're fearful of the fact that the Russian military has been very callous, very cold in its treatments of civilians, as we saw in Bucha and the Kiev Oblast, or really anywhere in this war. And so the Ukrainian government has decided that, hey, I think it would make sense if we withdrew these people from the east so they can get to a safe location, because Russian artillery continues to kill people in the east. And one day after the announcement is made for this evacuation, because they know that Ukrainian civilians will continue to die under Russian bombardment, literally 24 hours later, the Russians prove exactly why an evacuation of the area is needed, because the Russians don't give a fuck if they kill civilians. The Russian government does not care. That's not to say other governments particularly care, but the Russian government is the one slaughtering people here. The attack comes as Ukraine braced itself for Moscow to step up its assault in the areas it does not control in the Donbas region, comprised of the Donetsk and Luhansk provinces, having largely withdrawn from the territory of North Kiev. Referring to Russian forces, he said that we knew well where they were aiming and what they wanted. They wanted to take on as many peaceful people as possible. They wanted to destroy everything Ukrainian. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said the station was hit by the Russian Tochka tactical ballistic missile. Not having the strength and courage to confront us on the battlefield, they are cynically destroying the civilian population. The evil has no bounds, he said. The United States believes Russia used a short-range ballistic missile, the SS-21, for the strike, a senior U.S. official said, adding that Washington was still assessing whether cluster munitions were involved. Unconfirmed video posted on social media by the Ukrainian railway company showed police walking around corpses at the strike site. So the rest of this goes more in depth about the strike and etc., right? Now, and Bucha and other stuff. And I'm going to post this in the chat for you guys to look at yourselves. Now, this is just a flagrant war crime, a self-evident war crime. But the Russians, of course, have a response for this. And, it's of note to listen to the country that committed a war crime when these things happen. Maybe they have other evidence of a strategic use of, like, hey, look, this is why we did the strike, or here's why it was a good idea, or you get the idea. So the Russians responded, and we can pull it up on the live map right here. Here's the original Telegram post in full, so you guys, no, I'm not like bullshitting you. Obviously, I don't speak Russian, but the Russian Ministry of Defense claims that I'm sorry, I'm terrible for the pronunciation. You're gonna have to forgive me. That a Tochka-U missile was used, which they're claiming was used in the strike, is only used by the Ukrainian army. Now, this is interesting because it would actually be pretty suspicious if a weapon system only used by the Ukrainians was used to kill these civilians. That would put a wrench in the narrative that the Russians committed the war crime, wouldn't it? I mean, a lot of Western journalists and Ukrainian officials, Zelensky, the United States government. Well, the United States government doesn't think it was this missile system. They believed it was an SS-21. But a lot of Western officials would have a lot of egg on their face. There's just a slight problem that doesn't align with this narrative. And this is put out by Max Sedun. The Russian Defense Ministry claims it doesn't have the missiles that were used in the horrific rocket attack on the train station today. But just weeks ago, they were boasting about using them in exercises just before the war. So it could be what the American government is saying. U.S. intel has been crazily accurate about the conflict up to this point. Or it could be this missile system. But either way, saying, as the Russian government did, that, hey, this missile system that's being used, we don't even have, is nonsense. They've been using them for training exercises. And let's say it wasn't this missile system and then it was the SS-21, then this wouldn't even be a problem. But the Russian excuse or the Russian evidence that they didn't commit the crime is paper thin. It doesn't stand the slightest of scrutiny or research being done. It didn't take 24 hours to find out exactly why this excuse did not make sense. We do have, I believe, some other things I wanted to point out. So I haven't done a video on Buka, but this video, I think I should show you guys. Now, according to Twitch terms of service, I cannot show you guys gore or dead bodies. But there's nothing in Twitch terms of service that has anything to do with body bags, right? So technically, this video should be TOS friendly. I think it should be, right? It should be TOS friendly. I don't know for sure, dude. You know how the hell do I cover a war crime? How do I cover a war crime? While I'm how am I supposed to talk about a war on Twitch? How do I cover and talk about war crimes on Twitch? Switch to YouTube? I can't do it because for every time you guys are like, switch to YouTube, it's so much better. Dude, YouTube copyright is actually 10 times worse than Twitch copyright. Unbelievably. Twitch will just mute part of the VOD. YouTube will just like destroy your video. Like, you can't release it. They'll take all your fucking money. You're screwed. How do I cover a war crime? Well, if you add the word up there, then, you know, then boom, the Russian question. Okay, so I'm gonna be honest, I'm too scared to watch this, so we're not going to.
My name is
I'm sorry. Now that I've thought about it, I you know what? I think Twitch is going to include body bags and its anti-gore and anti like death and stuff policy. Last stream we talked about war crimes. And I think I have a segment pulled up somewhere here about war crimes. Here it is. Okay, so this person right here, this man who looks like that dog Pokemon. I think somebody actually posted it in my replies when I was talking about him. The guy who looks like this guy right here. Okay, this man is the spokesperson for Vladimir Putin. He is he'll do the media circuit and he'll just defend the Russian state. If the Russian state invades country, he comes out, he defends Russian state. If the Russian state kicks baby, he comes out, defends Russian state. If the Russian state stabs little bunny as it like tries to deliver candies to the children on Easter, he comes out and he defends the Russian state. And so as more and more Russian war crimes come out, particularly in the Kiev Oblast is where we're getting all these reports of mass executions and mass graves and people having their hands tied behind their backs and their brains blown out by Russian soldiers and their bodies burnt to try to cover up the evidence. So this guy decided to go on Sky News, which is a British news network, to, you know, basically defend the Russian state. And it did not go well. What we're about to watch is a man clearly presented with undeniable evidence that is clearly broke down how this is clearly identifiable as a Russian war crime. That it is the Russian vehicle that did the atrocity. Here is a civilian. Here is the name of said civilian. Here is photographic evidence. Here is video evidence. Here is everything from point A to point B. And it is so overwhelming for him that he has no choice but to deny reality and obfuscate. Let me just double check because I think there might actually be some TOS stuff in here. So I want to just double, triple check. Okay, it's blurred out. We'll be fine. Okay, let's watch.
And because our team has also verified this next video to early March in the same area of Bucha. And here we see a woman with a bike named today as Irina Filkina walking along Yablonska Street when Russian troops were in control. Around the corner is an armored vehicle identified by our team as a Russian military vehicle. So the Russians are there. You can see the vehicle fire a shot which creates a plume of smoke exactly where Irina was standing with her bike. Now, let me finish. If I could just finish, Ms. Press, sorry. After the
He tries to interrupt before he's even finished presenting all the evidence.
Russians have withdrawn, this video, geolocated to the exact same spot, showed Irina lying dead on the ground. So there can be no real doubt, surely, that this shows Russian troops.
So to be clear, there's a video of a Russian military vehicle shooting a civilian who goes into a spot that's clearly identified as a civilian. We even have the name of said civilian, and we then have the geolocation of where this occurred as well. There's video footage, there's photographic evidence of the body afterward, of the person going to there. We see the armored vehicle shooting there. It's clearly identified as a Russian vehicle. It has point A to point B. Very obvious what happened here. It's really undeniable, right? And this is why I wanted to wait a little bit before talking about these war crimes in the Kiev Oblast, is because you saw everybody immediately. Once these war crimes started unsurfacing, you saw all the usual hacks coming out to try to defend the Russians. And I knew it would be much easier to tackle a lot of this disinformation and show how it's just completely wrong, because the longer we wait, the more information is going to come out, the more evidence that presents itself. And then this is like just one example from Sky News reporting. This is presented to Putin's spokesperson. This is what he does.
Killing a civilian.
Yeah.
It's right there on film.
I'll appreciate if you could be more specific. I'll appreciate if you could be more specific. How could you exactly identify the Russian tank or whatever, what was standing? Why do you think it was Russian?
Okay, well, I think we got a still that shows the Russian tank. You can see, if you look at that, you can see the V marking.
I mean, come on. It's very obviously a Russian armored vehicle. First off, it could only be a Russian armored vehicle because that territory was controlled by the Russians at the time of the killing, right? Clearly, it was the Kiev Oblast. It's where all these bodies are being uncovered that were controlled by the Russians until very recently. Secondly, it is clearly marked with the Russian military marking. It doesn't have the Z everybody talks about. Everybody talks about the Z, but there's not only the Z. These are like different markings that the Russian military uses to identify vehicles. I think from like, we don't need to get into it, but there's also V's. There's like O's. There's different like symbols as well, but it clearly has the Russian military marking on it as well. It is a Russian armored vehicle. Anybody would be able to clearly see that. So what he's put in here is a very weird position, because there's no defense for killing civilians, which is all he could do if he wanted to engage with reality. If he wanted to engage with reality and continue his job as Putin's spokesperson, all he could do is be like, look, killing that civilian was based, it was okay, it was cool, or he would have to figure out some wild defense for it. There is no defense for it. Maybe he could say something like, well, why was, maybe the person had a bomb. Like, he could have tried to go down that route, but it would have looked awful. It would have looked horrible, because then he would just be defending war crimes on national television. And this is the same time when the government of Vladimir Putin is denying that they committed these war crimes in the Kiev Oblast. And so if he acknowledges that reality on national television, then that undercuts the Kremlin's messaging. And so instead of engaging with reality, he just starts obfuscating and trying to blur the lines of like, well, how do we know it's a Russian vehicle? Or like, what about the camera lens? Or, maybe there was sun in your eye and you can't really see it. And, it was Tuesday at 3 p.m. and that's, so you never try to just start throwing out random stuff. It's clearly a Russian armored vehicle. It's not really a question you need to ask. He asked for them to be specific. I have not seen reporters be more specific from point A to point B when presenting evidence for a war crime ever. If this was a criminal court case, like that would just be considered like lightning fast, razor sharp, prosecution. right, of you showing clearly how this was a Russian war crime. Here's a Russian armored vehicle. It's identified as a Russian armored vehicle. This is in Russian occupied territory. Here is the person in question, the civilian. Here is their name. Here is what they had. They had a bike. They went around here. Here is the Russian armored vehicle shooting. Here is a plume of smoke hitting where the civilian was. Now here is footage of their dead body that we've censored out for national television. This is clearly a Russian war crime. Your response. All he could do was obfuscate. But I wanted to show you this for, number one, to show that not only are these war crimes being committed and to show you clear evidence of it as presented by Sky News, but number two, to show you that there is never going to be a time, at least with this government, where the Russian government acknowledges that they've committed war crimes. There's never going to be a time when they're like, oh, our bad, we didn't mean to hit that school bus. We didn't mean to hit that train station. We didn't mean to kill that civilian. All they're going to do is deny, and point the fingers elsewhere. That's all they're going to do. There is nothing that benefits them by acknowledging that their army is a bunch of butcherous psychopaths. That doesn't help them whatsoever. And since it doesn't help them, and no one believes them in the first place, they have to lie to continue their domestic audience's support for the war, considering that many people in their domestic audience have ties to Ukraine, have family members that are Ukrainian, and don't want to, make them believe that they're butchering the country. That's a lot of people going into Ukraine thought they were going to be welcomed as liberators because of this type of messaging. That did not end up being the case whatsoever. I think the protests in occupied Kherson and other places in the south, where the fierce resistance they were met with through javelin, Panzerfaust, NLAW, and rifle fire clearly showed that. But basically, what I'm trying to get across to you guys is the Russian government is going to continue to lie to you, even when there is all hope lost on messaging, even when the evidence is undeniable, even when everyone in the world knows they're committing the war crimes, knows that it's settled, this is very clearly a war crime. They're just going to continue to deny it and just hope people will believe them because they want to believe them. That's the Russian strategy. When I talk about this war, something I bring up all the time is that I think that Russia should have to pay reparations for what it's done to Ukraine. That's never going to happen. It's just something I think should happen, but I also acknowledge that's not reality. That's not really even something that's in the conversation in the national spotlight. When you look at the destruction of Mariupol, which starts to look more and more like Grozny every day. Grozny, of course, is the capital of Chechnya, which was flattened by the Russians in the early 2000s because they were unable to take it back through traditional military means. And so they decided to, instead of be like, well, if we can't have Grozny, nobody can, So, if you look at what's happening in Mariupol, or you look at all the evidence of war crimes in the Kiev Oblast, or look at the civilian deaths in Sumy or Cherniv or Kharkiv and the war crimes that have occurred there when it comes to striking of schools and maternity wards or anything like that, or of course the train station strike, any of these things, the accusations of rape. I don't think the Russians are ever going to pay the price for these crimes when it comes to reparations or sentencing people for war crimes. I don't think that's ever going to happen. I don't even think that's something on the table necessarily. The only thing that could ever make that possibly come about is if there was a radical change in government in Russia. And I don't see that happening anytime in the near future unless there's a massive amount of instability that just falls out of the sky. Say with a failed military invasion and an autocratically, okay, maybe there is one scenario that could play out. But the odds of that happening are tremendously low, a lot lower than a lot of Western commentators would have you believe, because a lot more people support the war than a lot of people would have you believe. I'm not saying all Russians support the war, and really gauging Russian support for the war is actually quite difficult due to Russian law regarding what you can and cannot say about the war. In fact, me calling it a war is not exactly, in line with what you're supposed to be doing within the Russian Federation. So, with that in mind, I mean, there's like I forget what the website, the YouTube channel is. This is a great YouTube channel that does street interviews with Russians. And actually is something that's like impacted what I wanted to do out here in Poland and in Lviv and like possibly Moldova and other locations, is that I wanted to do these types of street interviews. Yeah, 1420, where they will go to people and they'll ask them about the special operation or the start of the event, because that's how they have to title these videos. That's how they have to talk about it. And like 50% of the people who like they ask, they'll just be like, don't want to talk, can't talk, can't talk, nope, can't answer, no. Or they'll look to the right, look to the left, and then they'll like do that, and they'll like shuffle away, right? Because they're just scared of talking about it. They don't know what'll happen to them. There was I think the advisor to the exiled like self-proclaimed leader of Belarus like talked about recently. I think it was their spokesperson, talked about how there was these children, like 13, 12-year-old kids in Belarus who were just putting rocks on the railway. You know how like people put coins on like the rail for like trains to flatten, and they're like, oh, cool, and they, just dumb kid stuff. Well, some kids put some rocks on the railway in Belarus, and some woman reported them for anti-war activities to the authorities, and the authorities got involved. People are like on their toes. They're anxious. This is not something like I think Russia and the Russian state has dealt with before. This level of just like military catastrophe, and like since Afghanistan. And hell, I would say that actually I would go further. I would actually say that this will probably end up being a worse military catastrophe for the Russians when it comes to like lives lost than Afghanistan. Just period. I mean, when it comes to civilian casualties in Afghanistan compared to Ukraine, not comparable. Like the amount of people that were killed in Afghanistan by the Soviet army, they butchered that country. They fucking butchered it. They would drop these tiny little plastic bombs that looked like toys almost in the countryside, and these children would pick them up and it would fucking kill them. If you look at a population graph of Afghanistan, it goes to like this until 1979, and then it just goes like this until the end of the war. It just goes down. Yeah, the butterfly bombs, that's what they were called. And they still lost. Yeah. So I think that should have been a signal to the Americans of exactly what it's like to invade Afghanistan. But you know how we are. The Russians couldn't get it done? Well, you know what? Let's put in a little bit of American ingenuity. I'm sure we can get this done. Oh my God.